First thing you need to do is extend the darts up into the inlay. I suggest at this point only chalking on the wrong side except for the pocket opening. Technically these are clems rather than darts. A dart is one that opens and closes, a clem is more open-ended. When taking the dart up into the inlay though, it should be tapered inwards at a commensurate rate to the dart bit of the dart. As I mentioned earlier, we can cut small notches in the tops of the dart on the top of the inlay so that we can see them from both sides, making it easier to fold over. When you fold the dart over, you can baste and iron it down. Don't baste on the dart line though, just next to it if that's what you choose to do. When machining the dart, we can start from the top and then just machine down the chalk line. As we near the bottom of the dart, we want to make it very slim. We don't want to curve into it as we get to the bottom. When we get to the bottom of the dart, keep machining off of the fabric. That'll quickly and easily secure the thread. One of probably dozens of ways of doing darts, not all of them wrong. We've done double welted pockets before, so I kind of don't need to do it again, but I think it could be useful. On the inside of the trouser, at the edges of the pocket opening, you should use 2 small squares of fusing. This will inhibit, if not completely retard, the chevrons from fraying, resulting in sharper corners, which is, a good pocket. Baste some 5 by 19 cm linen over the pocket opening evenly on all sides. Line up the first pocket bag up to the top of the inlay, at the very top of the trouser fabric, and make sure it runs parallel to the dart, and you could pin it in place before basting a little above and below the pocket opening. Then, get the jets up too. Line the first jet evenly onto the pocket opening, measuring that you have the same amount of jet on each side. Copy off each side of the pocket opening onto the first jet. Line the second jet up to the first, basting it down, and chalking on each side of the pocket opening again, which I forgot to do on camera. I want the bastes holding each of the jets in place to be very secure, so that the fabric, by extension the chalk marks, will move as little as possible in the machine. To sew them down, I want to reiterate that getting the start and end point parallel is important. Don't stitch more than ½ centimeter from the pocket opening. We really want the two to be 1 centimeter apart. 1 centimeter apart. Having used a sharp piece of chalk will make getting them parallel easier. You'll see more clearly exactly where to start and end. If the machine pushes and stretches a jet, you could have basted it more thoroughly, or you could just half ignore the chalk mark. Just make sure that the stitches end and start in line with each other. and make sure that the bottom of the cilicia is out of the way, which I bring up for no particular reason. Give the stitches a press, remove all the basting so far. Cut the pocket hole, be sure to cut the chevrons, something that the fusing is making much easier. Should you wish, I'd bet longer chevrons would make the next steps easier. Just a thought. From the back, without folding the jets through, we can press open the seam allowances. If you have cloth soap, we can brush some onto the pocket opening onto the back before folding it open. The seam allowance is split where the jet fabric meets the trouser fabric. I'm folding up the cilicia, the linen, and trouser. Press them both open and pull the mitres out as well. We can use a wooden block if we want and use it to press on what we've ironed. It'll absorb the remaining moisture and help the creases set. We'll baste the jets in place. Fold the jets to the inside of the trouser if not already. Fold the jets down over their seam allowances. If it was done precisely, the seam allowance should be 5 mm. We want the two welts to meet in the middle without gaping or overlapping. Then baste them in place along the welt, not on the trouser, only basting through the welt. Baste the welts together such that they won't move laterally, making sewing the chevrons easier in a bit. Give it a quick pre-iron, and while it's out, I'm ironing the lower jet under itself 1 cm. Fold the trouser and the cilicia either above or below the pocket out of the way, exposing only the welt. We need to machine the welt to the seam that was ironed down earlier. There's only half a centimetre to sew to, but we should get as close to the first stitch as we did as possible without sewing over it. Backtack both sides slightly before and after the seam allowance starts and finishes. Sew the top and bottom welts. Then for the chevrons, fold them to the reverse if not already, and pull the end, moving the trouser and silesia out of the way. Hold the ends of the two welts together, making sure they're flat there. You might like to do a preliminary stitch across the jets to keep them together. Pulling the mitre taut, stitch exactly across where it's cut to, between the two lines of stitching right where they end. Go back and forth over them, and if you're confident and you don't think you'll need to redo it, then angle the stitching to stitch towards the top of the pyramid, and then straighten out and do more stitches like the first few. Iron the jets to make them more crispy wispy, and at the same time iron the lower welt up such that you can fell it in place if not done already. Line up the bearer to the other pocket piece, either making them even or offset the bearer relative to the lower jet by a centimetre, and sew it in place one way or the other. On account of having a whole trouser, I absolutely did baste my pocket bags together before machining them, folding the trouser up and out of the way and the bearer facing outwards. Sew the perimeter with a half centimetre seam allowance. I trimmed away the little bits of excess, flipped the pocket inside out, pulled the stitching right to the edge and ironed it. And I just think it looks very satisfying like this. Do another line of stitching, 1/2 centimetre seam allowance to French the pocket closed. Along the top above the welt, make a seam closing the top of the pocket, which incidentally also seals any tabs or flaps up there. Iron and inspect your seams, and if they're good, we're good to go.